You're listening to Bottomshelf Bitcoin. This is episode 19.
Relax. Enjoy your coffee. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Take a chill pill. Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bottomshelf Bitcoin, the podcast that puts Bitcoin knowledge within everyone's reach. As always, I'm your host, Josh Humphrey, and today with me is Randy Brito with BitcoinVenezuela.com. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
So, I want to talk about several things today, but before we really talk about Bitcoin, can you kind of give us an overview of kind of what's going on in Venezuela politically? I know it's not simple, and I'm not going to ask you to give years and years of history here, but just I think a lot of people don't really have a clue what's going on in Venezuela.
Well, politically, what is currently in Venezuela is authoritarian regime with has all the powers in the country. So they have the executive, law, forces, and they control all of it without asking any of the other institutions. So basically they can do whatever they want, like executive orders daily. And most of the institutions there have to do whatever the president says. So in that is authoritarian regime, basically. More into the political scene is that there isn't any opposition group who could actually take power anytime soon. This is because the president, former President Chavez, basically destroyed all the opposition groups. They put everyone on jail. Anyone who could actually make something has been jailed or have been prohibited from running to any of the election. But the election themselves are gained. All the elections in Venezuela since 2001 has been run through electronic voting system, which has several, most of the time have been claimed to be fraud. It is basically a system where people vote electronically and the votes are counted or some are somehow distributed through a few networks that have been proven to have some hubs which basically jump through the country and sometimes jump to some servers in Cuba. So it's like there is a democratic authoritarian regime in Venezuela. They win the elections democratically, but only because they can't count the votes themselves.
And so what does this look like on a day-to-day basis for the Venezuelan people?
Daily, people need to basically make lines. Every day, they usually have to make lines for buying food. They need to make lines for buying medicine. They need to make lines for even using the gas station, despite being one of the country with it's the country with the biggest reserve of oil in the world, but it's unable to extract that oil because they don't have enough money to invest in machinery to do it. So since 2003, foreign exchange currency control and also a capital control were imposed by Chavez to avoid people fleeing the money out of the country when they started persecuting companies, private companies in the country. So this limitation has bring a lot of problems on imports, production, buy of supplies, and things that you need to produce other things, like also in agriculture, mostly everything. Most of the car are not assembled anymore in Venezuela, but you cannot buy the parts of the car because you are not able to import them. So there are controls in imports. Um, this limited number of currency or foreign currency, that hard currency that can be used to import things or buy things in other countries in order to produce inside of Venezuela, has bring has teach people how to exchange balances in some services. For example, people 10 years ago used to use a lot of Amazon gift cards, so they trade Amazon gift cards on online forums, through WhatsApp and other Facebook groups and things like that. So people are used to this. People are used to also exchange balances on bank accounts of different branches, so they can get transfers like automatically or instant, instead of waiting one day to get the transfer completed. So this is something that, despite they have learned this in the bad way, it's something that is helping them to understand that, despite they don't understand the technical part of Bitcoin, they understand that it could be some kind of balance that you can trade with others. So people are using Bitcoin and Bitcoin platforms and exchanges the way they used to use the Amazon gift cards, Neteller, Payeer, all these services to make transfers between them. They are also using that as a way to trade foreign currencies for local currency, so they can protect themselves from hyperinflation, which is currently calculated around 32,000% per year for these 2008.
That's really interesting, though. I had never heard about the using the Amazon cards and things like that. So that kind of makes more sense than that people are used to. Some people are used to using these alternative ways to protect themselves and provide. And I understand it. It's hard living in America to really picture that. But I think if I think that, hey, my family's daily living depended on figuring these things out, I think you just do it to provide for you and your family. So then tell us a little bit about yourself and about BitcoinVenezuela.com and what you guys do and how you got started.
I started myself learning about Bitcoin in April 2011. After a year reading about it and talking with people in IRC and on Freenode and reading all the Bitcoin Talk forum when it was possible to read all of it in one day. And I tried to teach people in Venezuela how to use Bitcoin using the regular forums there, like going to the most known forums in Venezuela and start talking about it. But people don't pay attention to what you say because they are mostly trying to survive every day. It's not like in 2011 there where the food, or 2012 the food were so scarce like it is now, but the problems in Venezuela come not only from food scarcity like it's now, or power outage, but it's also about crime and how you have to basically pay attention to whatever you do or say in the street, because you can get killed, or you could just bought your phone, and if you show that in the street, you can get killed just to someone trying to get your phone, for example. So it's like people don't pay attention to what is going on in the rest of the world. People are there basically trying to survive. So I set up BitcoinVenezuela.com as a trusted source of information about what is Bitcoin and how it can already be used in Venezuela for achieving some things. For example, importing or making job through the internet for other people, or resolving a person-to-person question, for example, online through Skype, so you can get paid with the cryptocurrency itself. I set it up as a non-for-profit organization, and after a few months, I started getting some. We started joining some people as collaborators. So we ran some talks in a couple universities. We funded through crowdfunding of Bitcoin some marketing campaigns, and also we made crowdfunding to make more talks through the countries. And in 2014, when there was one of the biggest riots in Venezuela since 2002 or 3, where the national economy was stopped as a way of demonstrations. In 2014, people started going to streets to riot and asking for the government to call for free elections. And people in the street started to stay for longer than a couple of days. So they started needing money, and we helped some people to raise money through Bitcoin to fund their riots. Basically, we were paying for food, water, and also giving money to some people so they could not go to work, that they could stay in the streets in their movement. This was something that bring a lot of attention to Bitcoin itself in 2014, because most of the riots in the streets were supported by the opposition leaders, despite they didn't go directly to the streets themselves. They were calling for revolt. So when the Bitcoin Venezuela group started helping these people in the streets, these people started noticing where the were coming from, where the money was coming from. They were asking about Bitcoin, so they started learning themselves. They started printing flyers and taking the flyers to the streets, not only the regular signs that you bring to a demonstration, but also bringing flyers about what is Bitcoin and how Bitcoin were helping them to keep the fight in the streets. So it was massively known back then that there was something called Bitcoin that was used to help them use their rights in the streets, while their government were basically killing them. So there was something, a tool that will bring them some liberty. And in that situation, 1 year later, when a new demonstration started, they were basically bringing signs of Bitcoin to the streets. And they were bringing them because the liberty movements were Students for Liberty, Movimiento Libertario, Movimiento Libertad Venezuela. They started talking openly about it in the streets to other people who were trying to fight for the freedom.
Wow. Okay. So that's already a use case. In America, I think people in the mainstream media like to say, oh, there's no real use case for Bitcoin. Or they say, if there is a use case, it's for all these horrible things, right? But, or people buy things just because they can with Bitcoin, but it doesn't really matter, like gift cards or things like that. But, from what you're saying, you guys have a real, actual use case for a censorship resistant money, that someone, that they can't stop from being used to purchase things. So, that's really cool. And that's encouraging, I think, for the rest of us to remember, like this does actually affect and is helping people. What are you guys working on now?
Well, currently we are basically trying to stop people from frauding or making fraud to each other. People are currently trading Bitcoin and local currency in some platforms, which are basically centralized platforms, or using local Bitcoins directly. But what people usually do there is try to save on fees. Even if the fees are pretty low, they usually try to save that because that's food for a couple of days there. So 1% of what you are buying or selling in local bitcoins for them, it's a lot of money. So they use the Facebook groups that we have, which currently have around 10,000 people in total. What we are trying to do is to find a way to reduce fraud. And the other thing I'm currently working on is trying to explain to people who are buying or selling products for foreign currency through balances. For example, there are people selling food or bags of food and staples and all the things through the in the internet or the Facebook groups, and they say I only get PayPal or I only get um, Russian rubles. I only get Amazon gift card, for example. And I'm trying to explain to these people that they can use Bitcoin as a currency directly and make it easier for others to pay. Because when someone wants to buy something like food, and the only way to get that food is paying with PayPal, they first need to buy the PayPal balance from someone else, and they need to pay a high premium. But if they are able to pay with Bitcoin directly, they can make the Bitcoin as an income by working or doing something, and then they can buy anything with it. So it's trying to explain that you can use Bitcoin as currency directly and stop using the Bolivar currency. Why I would like people to explain that, or I would like to explain to people why they shouldn't be using Bolivars. It should be pretty easy to spot, but it's really difficult when you get your income from Bolivars to stop using the Bolivars completely. And in that situation, it's like, as you said, people in the US or Europe don't understand why someone would like to not use their local currency. But it's difficult because in Venezuela, you get bolivars as your income, for example, from the government if you are uh, an employee of the government, or from the company you work for, because that's the only currency they are selling their products at for. So they get bolivars and they pay the employee with it. But the thing is that what is hard to understand is that when you get bolivars as a payment, you are already inside the radar of the government. This is something that is not common in most of the countries, but in Venezuela, if you make a transfer from your bank account to someone else, this transfer daily, the bank you used have to share it with the central um, with a central office of the government who take a look at every transfer that is taken that happens inside the country. And this is something that most people just don't care about, even in Venezuela. But the situation is going worse every day. So right now, for example, they shut down 90% of the bank accounts in one bank branch. They did it because they knew that people were making remittance from outside the country, like sending euros from one bank to another, and then someone in Venezuela was depositing or transferring the bolivars there. So they were making non-regulated remittance transfers at an exchange rate, which is the black market rate or the free market rate in Venezuela. So the government shut down the 90% of bank accounts inside this bank because they wanted to go through each one of them to look who were making or receiving remittances at an unregulated exchange rate. And right now, they have even publicly said that they will track any transfer in bank accounts in the last year, for example, that have been used for buying or selling cryptocurrencies at a speculative price and not the government regulated exchange rate for cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so they have their own official exchange rate. Is that what you're saying? That they say if you're going to buy a cryptocurrency, it has to be at this government sanctioned rate?
There is one fixed US dollar to Bolivar exchange rate since 2003, and since then has been 111 different exchange rates imposed by the government. So right now, the exchange rate approved by the government is one that is supposedly to be auctioned, which is selling dollars for importing things, and it is around 80,000 bolivars per US dollar. But the black market US dollar rate is around 2.5 million. So the government obviously don't like the black market rate, except for the fact they take advantage of it because they can get dollars at a very low price, around 80,000 bolivars, for example, and then sell it at 2.5 million in the black market. And this is something that has been happening like for 12 or 14 years now. So it's a lot of time. They have a way to make money out of this control in the currency foreign exchange. So the cryptocurrency itself are not that doesn't have a current fixed price by the government, but as the US dollar has one and cryptocurrencies are denominated in dollars, they understand or they pretend to control the sale of cryptocurrencies by these fixed exchange rates they want to apply. Right now, they are starting to open government regulated and approved exchange, cryptocurrency exchange in the country. These cryptocurrency exchanges are going to start offering the Petro, which is the government issued cryptocurrency. They say that is backed by oil, but they are not even producing oil, so it's not backed by anything. This local approved, government approved cryptocurrency exchanges will be like obligated to sell Petro, and also will set the price for the non-speculative price for cryptocurrencies when they start accepting bolivars, if they do, because that's something that we need to see, because it apparently they don't want to accept bolivars. Indeed, the Petro, when they started saying it was ICO or launch, they didn't get bolivars for Petro. They only got bitcoins and other cryptocurrency, US dollar, euros, rubles, and anything else, but not bolivars themselves. So the government was basically not accepting the same currency they issue because they don't trust in that currency, obviously. So right now, for example, the government approved exchange rate for remittances, for receiving remittances in the offices they have just let operate in the country under approved by them or regulated by them, is 1.3 million bolivars per dollar. So they themselves have changed from the auction 80,000 bolivars per dollar to the 1.3 bolivars per dollar with a blink of an eye. So in that, they still want to control the amount of bolivars they get or they give for each dollar. That way, they basically are setting the price of one Bitcoin like 2.5 or 3 times lower than it actually is in the black market.
So then the price of Bitcoin would be lower, but then you'd be subject to government surveillance, essentially, correct?
It will be lower, but if you are not allowed to buy with the money you have, which is the local currency, it's basically prohibiting you from getting that currency at that price.
So well, let's go back for a minute. So how are people getting Bitcoin then in Venezuela? Because, if it was me, I'm thinking I don't want to use, if they're already shutting down, the traditional banks to go through everybody's transactions history, then I think for me, I would be very distrusting of their official exchanges as well. How are people getting Bitcoin? How are people purchasing Bitcoin in Venezuela?
Currently, people are earning the Bitcoin by mining, because the last few years people were importing a lot of mining devices because of the cheap electricity in the country, because it's subsidized by the government. So there are many devices already in the country. So people can buy and sell the devices in the favor groups. People make an income from mining in that. That's one of the ways people get Bitcoins. Until a couple of months ago, when the government set up a new office for regulating mining and cryptocurrencies in the country, right now you have to get approved by the government to import new devices, not only ASICs but also computer parts. So you have to be approved by a brand new office which takes care of cryptocurrencies in the cryptocurrency regulations in the country. You need to be approved to, for example, importing a motherboard or a graphic card. So mining was like the Wild West until a couple of months ago in Venezuela. People were mining in their houses or neighbors' houses. They pay the neighbors to put their devices there, so they don't have all the devices in the same house. People had huge warehouses with thousands of crypto mining devices or ASICs. So that's one of the ways why there seems to be a lot of people with Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies in Venezuela. I say it seems to be because, as always, those that are able to have warehouses filled out with thousands of ASICs are not the regular people, are usually people who are very close to the government and people that have some kind of protection. Because if you are an individual with a couple ASICs in your house, it is really possible to get that you will get a visit from the Bolivarian Service of Intelligence, which is the SEBIN, and they'll knock your door and they ask you for a brief, or if you are not happy with the brief, or you stop paying them, they just come to your house and get the devices for them and put you in jail a couple months until you accept that you've been robbed and you stop looking for your devices. So this is what is common in Venezuela for mining. And the other way people are making cryptocurrency is basically through captchas and other actions they can do online, writing, reviewing code, on all the things. People who are doing this is basically all their income they have, and most of them even are the only income for an entire family of 6 or 8 people. They trade this earn bitcoins and cryptocurrency in local bitcoins, in the Facebook groups, in the Telegram groups, and all things. So that's the way people are making bitcoins in Venezuela. Is the high value that is shown in charts like in coin.dance, which is a website with charts from local bitcoins, shows more than 400 bitcoin per week. Is, I think myself, is not coming from people making peer review or writing articles. I think that volume come from people who makes a lot of money from mining and are selling them for local currency for whatever reason, or they are selling them for not local currency but any other currency in the world so they can fund their bank account outside the country.
Yeah, because like you said on Coin.dance, it seems like it's a lot. But I was also wondering how people would have a bunch of miners, a bunch of ASICs or whatever, because that's kind of what I had heard when you talk about individuals, is that you would get a visit from your government officials or police or somebody, and either the equipment would be taken or you would have to pay the bribe or whatever. So, okay, that makes more sense that people who have a lot either have some kind of connection or protection or whatever. So, okay. Oh, okay. So a lot of people then are just doing some sort of digital or online business service, coding, or whatever, and accepting it as their source of income. That makes sense to me. Now when they go to turn around and be able to use that, I mean, like you said, it sounds to me like you're working on merchant adoption. And I honestly have to confess, I'm not very familiar with, Venezuelan geography or where the big cities are, etc. But do you feel like you see a growing merchant adoption, or is it difficult? I mean, do people have to, let's say I'm a content creator or a coder, and I'm accepting Bitcoin as payment, then how hard is it for me to go get the things, my daily supplies or whatever, my food? Or do most people have to convert a certain amount of that back to bolivars or something else in order to go pay for things?
Yeah, people need to convert that to local currency in order to pay things. They make enough to be able to make a living for themselves and their families. So they need to basically exchange most of it to the local currency to buy most of the things. Also because most of the things are sold not that cheap, because if to find things when it's scarcity, things are really expensive. So they most of the time have to pay 2 or 3 times what something actually or what others are willing to pay, so they can get the things before the others ones. In that, despite they make their income on cryptocurrency, the common thing right now is convert that to local currency. Use the Bitcoin or dollars in some kind of service like Uphold, which lets you hold virtual dollars as a reserve of value or store of value, and then turn that into local currency when you need to buy things. This is because you cannot go to the grocery store and pay with the cryptocurrency itself, nor with the dollars, not even Uphold dollars. It's not that common. There are places in Venezuela, and this is going more common every day, that tells you when you come that you can pay with dollars. They tell you you can pay here with dollar in cash at the current price, for example. Or you can pay with bolivars in bank transfer. So you have to pay for example, this bag of foods and staples and things like that, this amount. But if you pay in cash, in bolivar cash, you get a 50% discount on the bag. So in that, it makes sense that people still use the local currency and bank transfers. First, because it's the only thing that people can openly accept, but also because you can have your money worth double, or it's worth double if you get, for example, local currency in cash. If you get someone to buy your bitcoins, for example, your couple bucks of bitcoins with the cash they have in their house, you can get that cash and buy something at 50% discount in the streets. because people need cash for other things, so they are willing to sell you the product at 50% if it's cash. That's one of the reasons people say that, and this is also in the US and Europe and everywhere, people are not going to pay with a currency which value is going to grow in the couple days or couple months when they talk about Bitcoin. But in Venezuela, it's kind of different because you cannot use the Bitcoins to buy something. For example, you cannot buy a bus ticket with it, but you can do that in Europe. You can go to Destinia and buy a bus ticket with your Bitcoins, but you cannot do that in Venezuela because there is not merchant adoption, at least not that broad. Currently, people depend on TMs or tellers or traders who give them bank transfers or cash or whatever in the local currency in order to buy most of the things they need. That's one thing I would like to change, which is convince people to use the cryptocurrency directly for the products they sell or the services they sell. And this is something that Dash, their community in Venezuela is really big, mostly because they get crowdfunded activities, talks, and all those things are paid based with the Dash Foundation and the Dash collaborators, and they pay for that. So they give talks around the country, and they have right now a project which is for merchant adoption, Bitcoin Cash Foundation, or I don't know the name of their fund. They have just published a way to get rewarded for each merchant they explain cryptocurrencies to and get them to accept cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin Cash, for example. And myself, with my team of collaborators, are trying to do the same for Bitcoin, Zcash, Monero. So trying to get people to use this currency directly, so people making an income on cryptocurrencies or mining cryptocurrencies can buy from others without going to the bank, or without converting to believers.
Okay, so then let's talk about charity and kind of how other people can get involved, and what I guess what does that look like in Venezuela as far as from the kind of charity side?
Well, the sending help to Venezuela is one of the examples that actually cryptocurrencies can help with, because as the authoritarian regime don't want to accept that they are failing to keep the companies and the energy, food, medicine change going, it is now really common to have to make donations to Venezuela. So they persecute the opposition leader who are crowdfunding help to Venezuela. They don't want to talk about it. So doing it with cryptocurrency is a way to actually help some people that do need this help. We are ourselves at bitcoinvenezuela.com helping to fund organizations who are non-for-profit, who basically go to these places where kids or go every day to eat, where all people who are left in some houses by themselves. So they go there and bring food, they bring medicine, they bring clothes to them. Also, there are a lot of people in the streets that don't have anything to eat. So this organization go through the street with their carts, with bags full of food and water, and they try to help these people by talking to them. This is something we are helping ourselves by asking for donations in Bitcoin, Monero, Zcash or Litecoin, any cryptocurrency people are willing to give, and we then look for these organizations who give the direct help. They basically don't get money; they get whatever they need for their activities, like food, boxes, bags, water, whatever they actually end up giving to people. Um, I run this activity myself with the collaborators of Bitcoin Venezuela, which we call Bitcoin for Venezuela initiative. Um, we have been doing that for 1.5 years now. Um, a couple more activities for crowdfunding funds in Venezuela I'm helping are, for example, Eat BCH, which was launched a couple months ago. Um, there are other ones, which is Hormigas or something like that in Facebook. And there are a couple few other Facebook groups or Facebook activities who are also funded with cryptocurrency. They basically share a QR code or Bitcoin address on their uh, pictures of the activities they do, and they get donations directly from the community.
Okay, now, I mean, I wasn't really going to bring it up too much, but since you brought it up, with Eat BCH, I know they kind of came under fire for putting people's pictures up. Um, do you feel like that's something that people in Venezuela actually care about or don't care about, or, um, you know, and I guess what are your thoughts on how do you maintain, I guess, transparency to people who are sending their funds saying, I want to help people? How do you make sure that those funds go to the right people? And how do, I guess, donors know that you're not just going to run off with their money? I don't think you are. I'm just asking, for the sake of conversation, how do we tackle those issues?
Well, as I do it as the founder of Bitcoin Venezuela, I basically use trust on that. I used to post the picture of the activities we did a year ago, but I stopped doing that for two reasons. First, because private donations are usually higher than the public ones that you get from the QR code that you posted. Second, because it's Venezuela, so you cannot post picture of people who are helping or even are being helped. In Venezuela, you can be persecuted or prosecuted, even jail, if you are helping others. One of the things I did once was uh, getting supplies for a hospital for kids that were not even getting their vaccines, or they weren't getting any treatment because they didn't have the supply to do it. And when we paid for that, I found someone trustable who were willing to find out what they need or the doctors need, and will deliver the things that the doctors needed. When we tried to do that, we were warned that we couldn't make that public, because last time in that same hospital that someone tried to get something to there, the military came inside the hospital and take the donations that someone sent from outside the country in a box, and they took the box and take it for them, and take the box for them from inside the hospital. So they took the supplies that someone donated, confiscated that. So in that world, which is Venezuela, most of the people running crowdfundings, food, and posting picture of kids in the streets, this these groups don't pay attention to what country they are on. I tried not to post picture of people because of that, because of they could, if they are a group or a known group and they could be persecuted, they could be put in jail. Um, Also, not I try not to post picture of kids or the people getting the food because they are known in their city. People see these people every day, so they can spot who is the one who appears in the picture, and that's really bad in that situation. Um, so in that, how I it's basically trust. People trust in me, and I trust in the people I help, and they deliver, and they take picture and video of it. Um, I privately share that with the private donators. But as there is no law in Venezuela and people can get jail for helping, I try not to make that public. That I think that's one of the things, not only because uh, these other groups were warned or criticized, not only because, or they did it only because of that could bring shame to the families who received the help, but they are ignoring that it's also danger. There is a risk for people to appear publicly, not only giving help but also receiving it.
Randy, I can't even imagine that. I mean, I work. This is not my main job. My main job is I work in a hospital, and so I can't even imagine not having the right, not having the necessary supplies to help your patients and care for people, and then when someone is willing to bring those in, having them confiscated. So, you know, I'm so glad you've come on the show today because, like I said, there's so many of us here, you know, in America and in Europe, and I think we just have no clue what life really is like for you guys. So where can I send listeners who want to help or want to contribute in some way, or if they want to get in touch with you? How can we connect with you?
If people are willing to help, they the best way they can do it is by teaching others to accept the cryptocurrency directly. That way, they will have the freedom to help inside their own country, to buy things, to trade, without going through the government system. In that, also, if people don't have the time or the knowledge to help others by teaching them, they could simply make donation to those that are uh, using their time and effort on teaching others. So it's like the the educational part is more into the local language because those who understand the situation are able to explain it better, but they don't have the means to use their time for that activity of teaching. They usually have to also work. They usually also have to make lines to buy their basic needs. So a way to help them is to give them time or basically donations so they can have some time that they can use for promoting and explaining and making people understand that they can regain some liberties if they use the tools that already exist.
Yeah, now that's really good. That's something I was talking to someone in another project about the other day, of just how much there still needs to be translations done for projects, you know, wallets and services. And so many of them have a very limited group of languages that they're translated into. And they have a lot of people that need to translate into various other languages.
One thing I wanted to mention to you when you ask how people could actually help Venezuela, this is something I've been trying to do for many years, is getting the tools, software, projects to understand that Venezuela is not a regular country, and that when they want to, for example, I have this for example, Coinbase Commerce. Coinbase Commerce is for merchants to accept for cryptocurrencies for their products, and is a user control wallet. So it's like, this is the perfect example of a tool for Venezuelans, so Venezuelans can accept cryptocurrency for their products and services, and they don't need to use Coinbase, where they cannot even get verified, for example. That's not true, because the merchant tool you've written that you expect Venezuelans are going to use is not even showing the price at the current exchange rate. So they cannot use it, because they cannot set the prices in bolivars, and their stores have the prices denominated in bolivars. So they, I don't know how you see it, but it's all this Silicon Valley product for the world. They try to help the poor, they try to help everyone, but they don't pay attention if those poor people and that people they are trying to help are actually even able to use the tools they have coded.
Okay, give me another example besides just the Coinbase thing. So you're saying you need more things in bolivars as well, or what?
Yeah, for example, I've been trying for many years to get someone to add the Bitcoin Bolivar actual free market rate. And that is something that, if you look up in the internet, I have failed to accomplish since 2012. So no one has the actual price of the Bitcoin in bolivars at the market rate. They usually use the government control and Yahoo foreign exchange how you say that? The one that Yahoo uses for the exchange rates.
Okay.
So they do this, and then if you get someone in Venezuela, for example, to use Litecoin or Ether through Toshi, which is another app that Coinbase funds, or Status Messenger, which also is a Ethereum wallet. If you would like to send, for example, I want to send you 1 million bolivars because that's what this coffee cost me, or that's the price of this coffee I'm taking here. I'm not able to do that from those apps. Even if I use the Venezuelan Bolivar exchange rate they provide, I won't be able to make the payment of 1 million bolivars at current Bitcoin or Ether exchange rate, the real one, because the coder didn't took the time to understand that the price or exchange rate provided by Yahoo or whatever, or Google exchange rates or Open exchange rate, is not the actual exchange rate of that currency in that country. So adoption not only comes because the tools exist, it's also because the tools are useful. So in that's one of the things I've been trying to do is to try to actually localize the app so people can use it. And if they are able to use it, just as they find out that Amazon gift cards were a better way of their, I don't know, the extra income they make, instead of keeping that in bolivars, they will also find out that they can pay others with these apps, denominating the prices in bolivars. So it's easy, and they not only easy, but it's also compliant with the regulations in the country, with the nonsense regulations in the country. So they can basically pay others in bolivars, despite they are actually sending others cryptocurrencies, which is a hard currency.
So where would I find the free market price of Bitcoin? How would you figure that out?
Well, you can see it at bitcoinvenezuela.com, and it is currently based on the market of local Bitcoins. It is currently only based on local Bitcoin because that's the only exchange operating in the country. There isn't any other right now operating in Bolivar, so we cannot take them into the calculation. But if there is any in the future and that new ones are actually free, not government control regulated exchange, they could be added to the calculation of a Bolivar. But basically, what you can see at bitcoinvenezuela.com as one Bitcoin for Bolivar is the result of, I think that, or well, not I think, what I have seen from people looking for the price of one Bitcoin everywhere in the world is how much does it cost to buy one right now if I give you the money. And that's translated into an exchange that is the result of a market order buy in exchange, which will take liquidity from the makers. So that's what I have used from local Bitcoins to make the price that you can see there, which is how much does it cost one Bitcoin if I buy it right now instantly with Bolivars.
So your website is bitcoinvenezuela.com.
Correct.
And then Twitter is what?
At BTCVEN, BTCVEN.
Okay. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about or say to the listeners before we have to let you go?
Well, I would like to thank you to inviting me here. And if there is anything that we could help on promoting this information that you want to share, count on us. And also in the, I guess, all the community of Bitcoin Venezuela will help you to spread the word about your podcast, but also about any other project that you may think could help Venezuelans to have more freedom and also to regain their liberties and their current situation there.
All right. Well, Randy, thank you so much for coming on. Our thoughts and prayers are with you guys there. And, anytime you think of something that you feel like the rest of the community could help you out with, either you directly or someone that you know, feel free to let me know and I'll let my listeners know.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that's going to do it for our show today. Something to think about and remember is even if you are not a programmer, if you know zero code, that's okay. Get involved with a project. If you are bilingual or multilingual, that's a huge help to people. That's a huge help to projects, especially if it's a lesser known language. You can get involved. There are, get on GitHub, figure out how GitHub works. It's really not that complicated. Go find the project that you want. If it's a wallet or a service, most of the time, if they're on GitHub, scroll to the bottom, they'll have a little icon with the OctoCAD on it, and it'll take you to their GitHub project page. If they're not open source, honestly, that should be a red flag. But if they're not open source and you still want to use them, find their contact information, get in touch with them, find a way to get to help with translations or something like that. But like I said, most projects that are open source, especially, are very open to figuring out how to help you help them. It's really not that complicated to do pull requests. I'm pretty sure I've got in one of my first episodes, I don't know, episode like 1 or 2 or 3, I've got a link in there somewhere about GitHub. I'll just find a video about how Git and GitHub work, and I'll just repost it for this episode, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/19. Figure out how Git works, how GitHub works. But even if you don't want to go that far, something else you can do is just get in contact with them. Most of them are pretty considerate when it comes to things like that. And so even if you are not a coder and you can't figure out how to use Git, then maybe they'll just send you the file with the words that need to be translated, and you can just line by line translate it and email it back to them or send it back to them somehow. If it's a project that you really like, find out if they've got a Slack or a Telegram page, group. I mean, not page. If they've got Slack or Telegram or something along those lines. Get in on that. Watch the discussions that go on, especially if you're not a coder. That'll help you learn these things. And, like I said, language support is a huge thing. And then, like Randy was saying, local support, because Spanish is a pretty common language. Most programs have a Spanish translation, but like he said, a lot of them don't realize or don't have the Bolivar on there, and especially don't have the, if you want to call it the street price of a Bolivar. They have the officially sanctioned Bolivar to US dollar exchange rate. And then then they base their Bitcoin conversion rate on Bitcoins to dollars and dollars to official Bolivar rate, even though that's not what the Bolivar and the US dollar are exchanging for truly in Venezuela. So all of that to say, get involved with projects and services and wallets and things that you think are beneficial, and find ways to help out, whether that's a language translation or localization, or if all of that's done for you, then, find people in your city or whatever, and try and get, your family or friends, I'm sure, are already annoyed with you if they're like mine talking about Bitcoin, but keep it up. Don't be condescending. Don't be ugly about it, but just, when you see the opportunity, talk about it. The other thing is, see if your area has a local meetup. And if not, start one up. I did this recently in my town, and we had someone come, and it was a good time. We had a couple people there, and then we're going to have another one in the next couple weeks. And so I'm looking forward. I've had a lot more people say they're showing up to that one. So I'm really excited about it. So you guys do that. There's a lot of people out there who don't really know very much. And, if you've listened to probably 2 episodes of the show, this is not really to brag. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that really just don't know things. So if you've listened to 2 episodes of this show, you probably know more than the average person on the street does about Bitcoin. So you can help other people out. Anyway, all the show notes will be, like I said, on the episode page, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/19. If you want to help us out, one of the best ways you can help me out is share the show. So retweet it or post it to Facebook. Like I said, usually on Thursdays, I get the YouTube episode up, so you can share it there, like all of those, give me a good review on iTunes or Stitcher or other places where the podcasts are at. And make sure you subscribe to the show through Stitcher or iTunes or whatever podcast thing you use, so that you don't miss an episode. If you would like to support financially, you can do so on a regular basis through Patreon. Remember, when I have particularly long episodes, I put up the full-length version of those interviews up on Patreon. And then I also just kind of do periodic video updates or things of that nature, just to let you guys know what I'm working on, besides just the show or things to do with the show. If you are wanting to do more like one-time donations, I've got a BTC Pay server page set up. You can go find that. Let's see. You can also purchase the Tuttle Twins books through my link, bottomshelfbitcoin.com/kidsbook, and a portion of your purchase goes to help support me do this show. So, those are all good ways. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you retweeting the show. That all helps other people find the show. The other thing is, like I've said before, I will be at BitBlock Boom. I'm not presenting, so I'm not super fancy or anything. I'll just be hanging out there in Dallas July 14th, I believe. Whatever that Saturday is. It's like the 13th, 14th, or 15th. Anyways, I'm going to be there. There's going to be a lot of good speakers. Michael Goldstein, Pierre Richard, Tour de Meister, Seyfedina Moose, and some other people as well. So y'all go check that out. That's going to be fun. And if you're going to go, send me a message, and let's meet up and grab lunch or something like that. So anyways, until next week, from Bottom Shelf Bitcoin, I'm Josh Humphrey. Thanks for listening.